The Michigan players are coming. How many and who, we don't know. And we will find out. Although the transfer portal losses there will be minimized for sure. 22 Michigan players are eligible for the NFL draft, and they're going to press that Georgia record from a couple seasons ago of 15 drafted. But the transfer portal, it just keeps giving and giving and giving and giving. And because of these coaches, of course, hanging it up and the domino effect, it has extended the transfer portal. And now, as of last night, another 30 days with possible Michigan players entering, but none to date. None to date. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you. And as promised, transfer portal update each and every day at 4 o'clock Eastern time. So here we are, whether we're here for 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 3 hours, whatever it might be, we will update the transfer portal and certainly bring in a number of great guests as we have over the last several days. So before we check out the transfer portal and the latest, because we've got a couple big Washington moves, basically they've taken their two pillars at guard and they've just transferred them to Oxford, Mississippi. We are going to talk some Big 12 football. We'll talk some BYU as well. We got Nathan from Big 12 Mafia joining us to break down the Cougars. Nathan, what's going on?
How are we doing, Mark?
I'm good.
busy.
Absolutely. I would say that looking over the numbers, that BYU's been a little less busy than others. I see that they've gained 4 and lost 7 in the transfer portal this particular cycle. Do you expect any more activity out of Kalani Sitake?
From what we've heard from sources inside the program, it looks like the next transfer time is in May for further signings and everything else before this season. That is supposed to be planned to be a big time. Because evidently when they do that, there's a lot of people that come in that maybe weren't looking at BYU before, or they go through the spring practices and find out there's no place for them. So it has been very laid back. I've got 5 on my list from December, and the number isn't high. Last year had BYU had 17 or 18 by this time, so it is quite a bit different.
Is that because they're just not making connections, or do you think that's a plan, scholarship limitations that they just aren't able to be that active?
I think part of it is BYU is a unique place. Well, everybody could say that, but we're really unique in the fact that we bring back a lot of missionaries from 2-year program or 2-year missions, and they come in, they come off their missions, they're not in shape, so then they need to figure out if they're going to play this year or next year, and then that dictates how many people actually come in before the season starts.
Did you have many NFL draft decisions that had to be made? That date obviously hit about a week ago, January 15th. So, how did that shake out?
I think we lost 4 or 5 that are going to be estimated to be in the draft eligible. It again, these 2 years, we knew this year and last year we were going to be slower, right? We were going to have a lot of transfers come in, but it's going to take a while for BYU to get its recruiting all the way up where it needs to be. They're still on target to have their best recruiting year ever, and we're having 4 stars are starting left and right from high school. And so I think that by itself really leads everybody to believe the next 2 years are going to be fun.
Best recruiting year ever.
Right. Yeah. Two, Satawala and, oh, I can't remember the other kid's name. They just recently signed at the end of December, and I apologize, I don't know have his name for some reason. Both 4 stars out of Utah. So those were huge gets. And at the end of the day, BYU is really working to catch up to Utah in its recruiting.
What do you attribute this success to?
Well, part of it's Jay Hill. the defensive coordinator, who is a master recruiter. And really, most of these signings are on the defensive side. I want to say 10 to 12 are coming in that are new from defense. And that by itself is now a new cornerstone. I think the offense you might see take a little bit of a step back. Certainly, the defense is going to be much improved.
We got Nathan on the line from Big 12 Mafia. What's going on over there on Big 12 Mafia these days?
So we're covering a lot of the bigger news stories. We're talking about FSU, the ACC, a lot of the recruiting and transfer portal for Arizona, Washington, and then Michigan. As you said, Michigan hasn't had any go out, which has been interesting. And then we're covering all the like House versus NCAA. So a lot of the legal disputes and organizational changes that are happening at the very top of college football. The college football playoff, and for us, it's realignment.
So, Nathan, I'm going to conjecture here a little bit that, and maybe I'm missing it because in this NIL era, all previous rules are out the door, but something tells me that, okay, so we're looking at, you mentioned how active Kalani Sitake was last year at this time,
Right.
not so much at this point, at least until maybe after spring practice. But I got to think because of the unique characteristics of the school, the campus, everything involved, as you just mentioned, that maybe a commitment means a little bit more here, and there's going to be less leaving and also more targeted selections outside in the transfer portal than just shooting and gunning for everyone. That once you get a commitment, that individual, that student athlete, had maybe been a little bit more serious about looking over what the situation is there, and so that they're a little bit more firmly committed.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the main thing that Kalani builds, and everybody uses it's trite anymore, but family is really what it is. We only recruit kids that can come in. BYU has a very high ACT score average is something like 24 or 25. The average student comes in at 31 or 32 on the ACT. So there's very high educational requirements. On top of that, it is a unique place. There's a lot of things that Utah does or BYU does that Utah doesn't, and that there is a stark comparison between the two. I think what we take away from it this time is that BYU's only lost 4 transfers out. Yes, we've only brought in 5, but look at most programs, they lose between 10 and 20 every transfer portal time. And I think that's probably the biggest mark of Kalani in the way he coaches and recruits.
So if you got quite a bit of hope that 2024 is going to be better than 23.
Well, it's going to have to be if we want to keep moving forward. Absolutely. If we're going to get 6 or 7 wins, we know how difficult that's going to be, especially in this new Big 12. I think we have to. There's no doubt about it. NIL is building at the school, and then I believe that the coaching staff is really bringing in some kids that are high character kids that probably won't transfer out. So if they stay for more than 1 or 2 years, that's a huge win, and that'll really build up BYU's depth.
How is BYU Nation taking to playing Utah every year? No doubt. Don't have to make any more decisions about it. It's locked in the Big 12. And of course, the pairing is the most obvious one in the conference that these two have to play, and that it's going to be a rivalry that's going to be not just on message boards, but it's going to be on the field every year.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Last game of the year, it's going to be right around Thanksgiving. The brands of Utah and BYU are arguably 2 of the best in the entire Big 12. And I guarantee you, Brett Yormark's going to lean into that. In my opinion, it's the number 1 rivalry now that we've lost Bedlam and we've lost a few of the other traditional Big 12 schools. And so I think at the end of the day, if they don't sell the heck out of the Holy War, it'll be a major loss. And I don't expect Brett Yormark's going to miss that.
Nathan, how is BYU handling NIL?
What's interesting is they were one of the first breaking NIL programs to actually partner with whole businesses. They would come in and they give the entire team, they would pay for all their schooling if they're not on scholarship. They were one of the first schools to do that. I think now that we're looking at, anywhere from 7 to 10 to 15 million in NIL, it's going to take a while for BYU to get there. So I think you have to build a trust. There's a lot of concerns about what the NIL regulations are going to be anyway. And so people are a little conservative with their money. But I think as trust comes out and more structure gets around NIL, I think it's going to make a big difference, and the trust factor is going to go up a lot. I think, look, we have several $billion graduates. There's no reason why BYU students who haven't gone out into the world, make a lot of money, can't give back. But the struggle is, and you know this just as well as I do, who do you give if you're a major donor? Do you give to like the Cougar Club at BYU, or do you give to an NIL? Do you set up a foundation and only fund NIL out of that and do it tax free? There's so much regulation that I really think something needs to change, if not at Congress, certainly at the NCAA level, to grab our hands around it and put some more structure in it. Because right now, there's absolutely no rules.
Absolutely. We had a conversation about this as we do practically every day in some form, but with Tony Syracuse, our guy at Last Word on College Football concerning
Right.
NIL. And I'd like to dive into it a little bit deeper. And I certainly have my suggestions and guardrails that I think should be placed on it. I in no way want to restrict and put these student athletes in a position that no other American has been in. And that was the former world that they lived in, and not being able to supplement their scholarship in any such
Right.
way. I don't believe that that's justified. But at the same time, we do need structure desperately in this sport. And this is the most pressing need right now that's facing the sport, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with you. Tony Siragusa's show. I love it. And we really appreciate the value he brings to college football and the wider world for exposure and everything. But look, at the end of the day, the NCAA needs to settle. The House versus NCAA is going to determine whether these players might become employees, if they become contract workers at the conference level. There's hundreds of good ideas out there, but the ones that we really have held on at our show on Big 12 Mafia is, at the end of the day, the players need to get money. And if it's profit sharing, if it's some other method that makes sure that every player that is playing both in college and football and basketball should have some type of NIL money. And we just need more structure. That's all it is to it. At the end of the day, if we can even put in, my idea is a salary cap, give each school a number that the max they can spend out, and that way we would stop some of these crazy numbers, like Rashada's 11 million last year, which was just, or 14 million. That was insane. And he never saw any of that money, moved to Arizona State. And who knows? But right now, there's no contracts, there's no formal commitment, and something needs to change.
Yeah, so the salary cap idea I can get on board with, except for one huge issue, is that as I see it, there can't be a salary cap without being a business. So the
Right.
NFL can institute a salary cap because they're running a business, just
That's
like
true.
if you work down at the grocery store, they, in a sense, have a salary cap. It's called a budget. So they allot 20% or 50% or whatever the percentage is to the salaries and the income and the pay of the employees at the store. And then the better they do, typically they'll hand that a portion of that to the employees. Or if they do worse, either they have a buffer and they don't have to limit pay or decrease anybody's pay. But if business gets so bad, then they obviously then go through layoffs or decrease pay. But basically, the payment to the employees is in direct correlation to how well the business is doing.
Right.
And you would have to, and all this money is coming from private corporations and private donors. So how do you put a cap on that? How do you cap what people are allowed to donate to athletes.
Well, for one thing, it's madness right now.
Yes.
When $15 million at Ohio State to fulfill all their NIL commitments a year, $15 million a year, and then you look at a school like, and I'm just going to throw a cheap one out there. I would say SMU. I'm teasing. SMU is going to have a ton of money, but any other school that doesn't have a lot of backing like that, even getting to 7 to 10 million seems right now kind of crazy. So
Yeah.
it all depends what the vision is at the NCAA for this sort of next level of organization. In my opinion, it's going to be A4, possibly A3 for autonomous. Who knows what's going to happen with the ACC once FSU leaves, and those conference or those schools in those conferences, in my opinion, they should be at a different level. A lot like Charlie Baker brought up. He had some kind of crazy ideas, but I think one of the good one would be is if those four conferences break away, and they don't break away the actual games they play. So you still have BYU playing Boise State, for instance, but those conferences by themselves sort of are a different level on pay, on getting money out to the programs, on all the institutional stuff they can provide, and that would sort add structure to what right now is a lot of chaos. I mean, you brought up some very good points, and I don't know necessarily how the pay scale increases or profit sharing would be managed outside of some sort of a master system that each school had an amount of money, and it's a delicate balance because you're right. If they make the players employees or they turn it into NCAA football slash NFL, then at the end of the day, these schools might lose their tax-free status. You have all kinds of big funds out there that are already paying for these schools to operate, and the athletics is supposed to stay separate. I don't know how they do that if they make them. That's why I'm not sure about making them employees or making them contract workers. I think it needs to be a system. Maybe contract workers could be used, but at the end of the day, these schools need to be giving these players money and paying for their health insurance and care after they leave college. It's just not fair the way it's worked right now. Something needs to change.
Among other things, the biggest issue I have with NIL is that it's not being operated the way it was intended to be operated. So
Right.
I think back more than 10 years now when there was an issue with Johnny Manziel supposedly signing autographs and getting money back. And then the NCAA suspended him for the first half of a game and then actually admitted that they didn't even prove that he did anything wrong, but they still suspended him for a half a
Right.
game. So we know something was going on. So I produced a video that's 10 years old at this point to say uh, any of us that are American citizens can benefit from name, image, and likeness. We can
Right.
benefit from our celebrity, except for these student athletes. So why can't they? However, we've gone the pay for play route.
Right.
I know that there are some exceptions. I remember as soon as NIL was legalized, that I believe it was Bo Nix down at Auburn had an iced tea deal. And then that's what this is supposed to be. You're supposed to be representing some type of initiative, whether you put your face on a iced tea jug or you do Instagram posts or whatever you're signing autographs down at the local car dealership. There's
Right.
supposed to be some reciprocation for the pay you're receiving, name, image, and likeness, not just you're showing up to play and we're going to pay you this amount of money.
Right, it's really been distorted. And there was this other thing where without the regulation, some people think that it should be tax free. So people can donate to an NIL and they don't have to pay taxes on that money or report it. And it's just completely messed up. You used to have to do a service. What you're talking about specifically is you trade a service for a service. And right now, I think for the most part, none of those obligations are being met. There are some people at BYU, they're really trying to keep their clamp on it. So there is some sort of a trade, but I think it's spinning out of control. And look, at the end of the day, it's untenable the way it's working right now. Without any regulation, without any structure and rules, I just don't know where this ends up. But I'm telling you right now, the NCAA is 5 minutes away from being defunct as far as it comes to football. They have no oversight or control. You have these arbitrary rules. I mean, look, Jim Harbaugh, there's cheating there. They, 3 weeks suspended. I mean, it just, there was no proportionality to any of that. So I don't know how they do it. I mean, there's so many complications, but something has to change. And if they wait for Congress to do it for them, it's going to turn into another tax and revenue source for the federal government.
Well, that suspension of Jim Harbaugh didn't even come from the NCAA. That came from the Big Ten.
Right, right, right.
And then the other thing is when you talk about the NIL regulations, now we're seeing, as you just mentioned off the top about what you guys are discussing there at Big 12 Mafia with the Florida State situation,
Right.
the NCAA is now involved in an investigation on the Jaden Rashada situation in Florida, and it may involve another school. And then you've got the Florida State penalty that was handed down. And to your point, there aren't specific guardrails and guidelines and legislation and all of that in place, but the NCAA's there are some, and most of that's linked to what particular state you're operating in. So the NCAA is now starting to investigate, but I think that the restrictions, the guidelines, all that should be put in place and set before we start running around penalizing schools.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it has to start somewhere. So there's baby steps. Nobody's saying it has to happen overnight. Maybe phase it in 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. But right now, the NCAA is toothless. They do these investigations. There's going to be some level 1 and level 2 violations. I mean, basketball, that happens. If your school hasn't had a level 1 violation, I don't know what you're doing and you're recruiting. So it just doesn't make any sense. So whatever they decide, write it on the wall. Everybody sign it in blood underneath it and commit to those things. And then there needs to be specific enforcement mechanisms put in place so that when you have a Rashada incident happening again, everybody knows what that penalty will be. 1 game, a year, 5 years, whatever it is, there needs to be a penalty that people can draw a line from the consequence or action to the consequence, and people are held accountable. That includes coaches. There's lots of things that need to be done, and they just have to decide they're going to start somewhere. Because right now they're throwing their hands in the air, saying, "Congress, please help us, because we can't, we can't do it ourselves," and it's just a mess.
All right, folks, everybody watching us, of course, is hardcore college football fan and probably a Big 12 fan by extension. So we've got a Big 12 channel, so check it out. You see that on the screen. And then more importantly, head on over to Big 12 Mafia and check out Nathan's work. It's right here on YouTube. It's easy to find, Big 12 Mafia. Nathan, appreciate you stopping by, breaking down things for us.
Anytime, Mark. I still got to get you on my show. I apologize that I let things get in my way to inviting you. So we'll have to do that soon.
Absolutely. Look
All
forward
right.
to it.
Okay. We'll see you later.
We'll
Peace.
see you. All right. Basically, how I've set this up for this week, folks, is that again, with the transfer portal being extended by the Nick Saban retirement, and I stop right there because that's basically what has extended the transfer portal until last night with the Jim Harbaugh move to the NFL. But before that, it was all predicated on Nick Saban retiring because we had a transfer portal that ended. I forget the date. It was around January 10th or 15th, something in that range. And so that would have been the end of the regular season ending transfer portal window. And then Nick Saban retired. And so that extended 30 days. And then 3 or 4 days later, Kalen DeBoer was hired to Alabama. That extended Washington players another 30 days. And then a few days after that, Jed Fish moves is part of the domino effect from Arizona to Washington. That extends everything 30 more days. And then from that date, and then, of course, you had Brent Brennan move from San Jose State to Arizona. Then the San Jose State window opens up for 30 days. And now, as of Wednesday night, which I believe the date was January 24th, tack on 30 days there for Michigan players to enter the transfer portal. And I think it's a really good sign for Michigan in particular that the portal has now been opened for them. I guess that goes from the exact announcement, or maybe it goes to starts the next day. So let's say it started this morning, that here we are late afternoon on the first day. And unlike Alabama, unlike Washington, we are not seeing any Michigan players to date as of a few minutes ago that have entered the transfer portal. I expect there to be a few. I think that's because of two things working here. I think one of them is that you have just an abundance of draft eligible players. As I mentioned, we ran through 22 Michigan players that could be drafted. Now, they're not all going to be drafted, but they will very much push that Georgia record from a couple drafts ago, the 15 number. But they've got 22 players, including the kicker, who are draft eligible and who will be looked at that could be drafted. So that's weighing into this heavily, that they have a very senior or junior eligible for the NFL draft laden team, but also that I do think that the culture is speaking well of Michigan right now. And we'll see how it plays out. But as I mentioned to a couple callers last night that asked and were concerned about the 1 week window by Michigan state law that is enforced to leave open a job and to take applications, and that's what the state requires, that you just can't have a job open and then immediately say that's the successor, that you have to, because of fairness practices, that it has to be available for a week, that you go in front of the football team if you're Ward Manual and you bring in the coaching staff and you let them know the reason that this job is open for a week and that we cannot communicate to you a successor, whether that's in-house or uh, outside the Michigan program, is because we can't by state law. Give us this week plus, give us 8 or 9 days, and just hang tight and give us this time. You will have 22, 23 days to make a move after that if you so choose. But we've got a great thing going here. We've got a great culture. We're in a good place here. You're in a good place here. Just give us a week or a couple days after, and then you can make your decision. But just wait and see what we do. All right, we are here to run down the transfer portal activity since the last time we got together. So let's dive into that. And I am counting 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 players. And who knows? That was about an hour ago. We'll probably pop open the transfer portal list here on 247 Sports, and we'll see a few others. In regards to the guests that we're having on, the way that I've approached that is it is just virtually impossible, or let's not say impossible. Let's say it's ineffective and a waste of time for me to try to schedule certain guests for specific time windows. So I just kind of throw it out there for a number of our media contributors to jump on whenever they would like. So we've got about 4 or 5 that may join us or may not, but certainly the window's closing because we're going to run through these transfer portal actions from the last 24 hours. And we're going to survey your comments and questions as well. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App is the most effective way to contribute to the voice of college football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And you can get those links in the description section of the video. And with Cash App, it's just the $ Mark Rogers TV. There you go. Again, that's the most effective way to do it. And we appreciate your contributions. Amazon links in the description section as well. So when you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. Let's get to the transfer portal activity from late Wednesday until today. And this is what we've got. So we got a big blank screen. We've got a big blank screen there on 247 Sports Twitter. I don't know what's going on there. I don't think that's my laptop acting up. I do not believe, because all the other pictures are there. So who you're supposed to see right there is Nate Kalipo. Nate Kalipo is a guard who played for the national runner-up Washington Huskies. He's played 40 games at guard, played 15 games at guard this past season. All starts, one of the best guards in the nation. Gave up only 1 sack, 923 snaps in front of Michael Penix, and he only gave up 1 sack and 16 pressures. And he's the 8th rated offensive tackle in the transfer portal. Why does it say offensive tackle? He played guard. Anyway, 8th rated at his position in the portal. And again, we're talking about a really, really stout player who's probably going to play in the NFL, and he's gone from Washington to Ole Miss. Okay, now let's see if we can actually see some pictures here. We've got, in addition to Kalipo, we've got the other guard from Washington. So basically, Washington took its 2 guards, unfortunately for Jedfish, and they have headed to Oxford, Mississippi. The other guard is Julius Bulow, who's moved from Washington to Ole Miss. 6th-year senior. Played in 12 games, started 9 at guard. So the 2 guards for Washington, I just find this, I don't know why I keep repeating it. 2 guards from Washington, both transfer on the same day to Ole Miss. And then we've got Lane Kiffin posting on X about Ohio State plucking up transfers and spending a lot of money. And he gets the 2 guards from Washington, the team that won the Pac-12 and played in the national championship game. There you see Vanderbilt transfer tight end Logan Kyle is committed to James Madison. He caught 11 passes last year for 103 yards, and he's going to play for a JMU team that's obviously extremely successful. Here we've got a situation that, again, I am impressed by the work being done by Brent Brennan at Arizona. He has kept Noah Fafita. He has kept their best wide receiver. He's kept their best defensive player. He has kept this offensive lineman here who entered the portal, but now he's back staying with Arizona. Raymond Polito staying with Jed Fish there in Tucson. Here we've got a very successful running back at New Mexico. So the Lobos were just a 4-8 football team, but don't blame this guy. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt ran for almost 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, caught a touchdown pass. He had 18 touchdowns as just a freshman, and he is entering the transfer portal as a grad transfer. So I find it interesting there. So he's a grad transfer, but in looking up his numbers, just had the 1 year at New Mexico. So possibly he was a transfer the year before that and maybe played in FCS. And so his numbers did not register. We have a couple of Arizona defensive linemen. And did I mention just a second ago that I'm impressed with Brent Brennan retaining his players? Defensive lineman Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis, 2 D linemen that were pretty prominent. Ward had 30 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Davis had 5.5 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks and 16 tackles. And they're both staying at Arizona. Brent Brennan is doing a heck of a job. We mentioned this yesterday. So Nick Nash, who's an all-conference performer at wide receiver from San Jose State in the Mountain West, he entered the portal a couple days ago. Then 1 day later, I'm going to stay home, stay at San Jose State. So that's good to see that a pretty prominent player who started out as a quarterback turned wide receiver, and now an all-conference wide receiver, 48 catches, 8 touchdowns, 728 yards, stays at San Jose State. So good to see a couple guys staying at their same schools. This guy is moving on again. Wide receiver Chris Marshall has played for 2 SEC Western Division teams, Texas A&M and Ole Miss. He did not play last year. I don't know if there was an injury or what happened, but he was a big, big recruit, 5-star out of Texas, and he caught 11 passes 2 years ago and did not show up on the stat sheet this last season, but he's moving on to Boise State. So guy that's played his football in the SEC for 2 different teams goes to Boise State. And then we've got another guy that's sticking around. I can do without the throne look. That looks stupid, but, the kid's 19 years old, so whatever. Washington early enrollee Kamori House has decided to pull his name out of the transfer portal, and he is staying with the Washington Huskies and Jed Fish. So Jed Fish retains a player there. So good for him. What's going on in the chat? I do appreciate LFG. Every time he shows up, he says, I hit the like button and I am number 15 this time. And that just encourages everyone else to hit the like button. It's an easy, easy thing to do. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got our guy Cody Stovall jumping on board from Locked On Huskies. I'm sorry, I've been saying Locked On Huskies so much since they went to the national championship game. Locked On Oklahoma State.
Hey, it's all right. We had a Husky on that team.
Who would that be?
Jabbar Muhammad played 3 years for O State before he transferred to Washington.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's moving on again.
Yeah. Now he's taking his talents elsewhere once again.
Yes, as they say. Well, Cody, good to see you. Good to have you here, as always.
Very good to see you as well, Mark. I greatly appreciate the time, sir.
Absolutely. I've got Oklahoma State, with just about as many guys that they're losing versus gaining in the transfer portal. What's been your assessment? Do you think that's been a winning or losing formula this time around?
Well, time will tell, but the formula this year is predicated upon having so many returning guys, right? Yep. Mark, I don't know of another team out there returning 20 of 22 starters. I honestly do not. But when you have this many 6th-year, 7th-year guys, a lot of people got rid of their extra COVID year guys for the most part last season. Oklahoma State is not in that camp. We have an exorbitant number of 6th-year, 7th-year guys. So numerically, we don't really have a lot of room to be bringing guys in. So with that age of, a bunch of 6th-year, 7th-year guys, we are kind of what we are, right? So we're not going to have a lot of room to maneuver in the transfer portal, which is why you're seeing the number that we've brought in pretty indicative of the number that went out, right? We lost like 6-7 scholarship guys. We're bringing in pretty close to around the same. Now, when it comes to the transfer market directly, we pinpointed Tyler Foster, the 6'7" tight end out of Ohio, to kind of replicate what we were able to get out of UMass transfer Josiah Johnson at tight end this previous year. We got all 6 O-linemen back, but we also got Isaiah Glass, a 6'5", 300-pound tackle that started a couple years at Arizona State. So we theoretically now go 7 deep on the offensive line. Of course, we got Ollie Gordon back. We got A.J. Green, a transfer coming in from Arkansas, who had 952 yards spelling for Rocket Sanders there at Arkansas. So he's going to be a good complement to what Ollie Gordon provides, right? Ollie Gordon's the Thunder package. A.J. Green's more of the Lightning package. And then after that, man, the waters get kind of muddy, but it's because we don't necessarily need a whole lot, or at least from a numerical scholarship number, we can't bring in a whole lot, even if we did feel like we need it.
Cody, it sounds like your team's gunning for a Big 12 championship next year.
That is the objective. And as you've seen with the new defensive line coach, right? I think the common consensus around the team was we don't have a lot of ability, whether it be financially or scholarship numbers, to be able to go get a bunch of people. So let's go get a coach that can make our defensive line instantaneously better with the guys we already have. That leads me to believe that Mike Gundy knows that 2024 is pretty important, because him firing an alumnus, right, a Cowboy legend that's been on staff for quite some time, that is not a normal Gundy move. So for him to fire an alumnus, by the way, that just helped Oklahoma State be number 1 in the Big 12 in forced fumbles, number 1 in the Big 12 in fumbles recovery, number 4 in the Big 12 in sacks. We fired that guy after he produced a decent amount, which tells you that Mike Gundy knows 2024 is pretty daggone important.
Everybody's focused on the transfer portal, but I'm going to ask about the 25 recruiting class. Is that off to a decent start?
It appears to be, yes, right? From a matter of fact, I will be flying out to Houston tomorrow to cover some high school 7-on-7 tournaments, recruiting circuits, and things of that nature. The high school coach's reputation for Mike Gundy has gotten better. Realistically, there was a little bit of an apprehension for certain high school coaches to send their players to Oklahoma State because they couldn't guarantee that, they were going to get the right product out of the player. That seems to have shifted a little bit recently, not only because of the emergence of Brian Nardo. I'm telling you, this defensive coordinator we have might be the best recruiter we have in the room, not named Benny Tonga. Benny Tonga is responsible for Oklahoma State landing Mason Cobb, Jalen Warren, Mayolake Smith, Sesi Valahe. Pretty much all of the West Coast flavor comes from Benny Tonga. Right now, defensively, Brian Nardo is that big of a name. I mean, heck, good and doggone well, Oklahoma State doesn't have an overabundance of guys that get offered from Texas, right? Well, the 2 Cowboys that got Texas offers this year were Landon Cleveland and David Kumbongo, both of which are defensive backs, both of which decided to stay committed to Oklahoma State, even though they've got some Texas and Alabama offers because of Brian Nardo. So I don't think that the number associated with Oklahoma State recruiting, even in the transfer market, we're not going to be ranked on the transfer portal class because we only got a few guys. You know what I mean? So I understand that. But the reluctancy to put Oklahoma State up in the top 40 in recruiting, I think that number obviously has to get better, and it needs to start getting better with trophies. Mark, we've played for so many Big 12 titles, but we only have 1. You can't be 1 for 9 and expect your numbers to increase. But we had another 10-win season. OU and Texas are no longer in the way. Utah's coming back, but they're losing, 80% of their secondary. Offensively, Utah's going to be great. Arizona State, they've got a ways to go. Arizona's going to be really good, but replacing 90% of your coaching staff's not going to be easy. Oklahoma State is not dealing with any of that. We're not losing a bunch of people. We're only losing 1 coach. And the 1 coach that we're, quote-unquote, losing, he's still a legendary alum that's going to be very helpful along the way. So it's a rare time in anybody's fandom to have 90% of a roster and 20 of 22 starters returning, but that's where we stand. So we're not going to be super aggressive in the transfer portal market. Even if we wanted to be, we financially had to make sure that NIL was designated for guys like Ollie Gordon, Colin Oliver, Nick Martin before allocating that money for the NIL in the transfer portal.
We've got our guy Purple Orca asking a question in the chat. He says that I have not caught this comment, but that Jed Fish made a statement that the Big 12 doesn't have a pathway to the playoffs. That seems kind of odd. They have certainly one definite path to win the conference championship. So I don't know where they came from. I don't know if you heard anything about that. I'm guessing that Jed Fish would have said something differently about 2 weeks ago than he would today about that, if there was some disparaging comment.
Well, A, I had not heard that. And B, that would be a pretty preposterous statement because, like you just said, if you win the conference 99.99999% of the time, you're automatically in, right? Yeah. And then if you finish second in the conference, let's say the scenario that happened last season, where you had an undefeated TCU and a 3-loss K-State, right? K-State took care of business, Big 12 champs. TCU still ends up in the Final Four, beats Michigan, so on and so forth. That scenario would have put 2 teams in the 12-team playoff. I think that is more likely than the Big 12 not getting 1 rep. I think the Big 12 has opportunity to get 2 representatives in more often than just 1.
Yeah, I would agree with
and
that.
the ACC is not necessarily swimming in hot oil right now either.
Well, I think the committee is going to approach it like this. If you would take each season of the last 10 or 15 and place it in this 12 team, and obviously more so during the playoff era because there was a college football playoff committee. Before that, you would just have to use the rankings. So it's not the same, the AP rankings. Yes, you are seeing multiple teams from the Big 12 in the playoffs every year. Now there is an Oklahoma and Texas in there, but at the same time, I think the committee is going to play it pretty straight, meaning the champions get in, then they're selecting the highest ranked, the best records out there, and they will give a nod to the SEC and the Big Ten if 2 teams are 10-2.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question that they're going to go that route until it's proven otherwise. Let's say we're 3 or 4 years down the road and there's a history there that the SEC's crushing it, the Big Ten's crushing it, whatever, or the Big 12, the ACC has been able to hold their ground both in the playoff and in key non-conference games during the regular season to say, no, we're going to cut this a little bit more to just the better resume and the better record is going to get it. But I would anticipate the Big 12 is going to get more than the champion in. I don't think there's any, well, there's a question about that. It's possible, but especially with the competitive nature of the league weighing down, most likely weighing down the records.
Yes, that's the only hiccup I would say is the Big 12 is going to beat the tar out of each other. I would argue, Mark, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the Big 12 not the only conference where last place can beat first place on any given weekend?
Oh, absolutely. It's the only one. Yes.
So, yeah, that is gonna, obviously be a little bit of an obstacle because we're gonna beat each other up. But I think that the flip side of that coin would be because of that, if we do get to the postseason play, the Big 12 teams are going to be a little bit more battle tested than maybe an ACC team or a meddling Big 10 style team.
Fair
but
enough.
Yeah, I think the CFP committee just spoke. I don't agree with Florida State not getting in. I think Florida State should have got in, but they just told everybody that'll listen that undefeated in the ACC is not the same as, a 2-loss Big 12 team or a 2-loss SEC or Big 10 team. It's just not.
Well, they got to hide behind the injury. Now, if Jordan Travis was healthy, then we would have gotten to really see them with some heat on them. Either still go forward with that same decision or allow Florida State in the playoffs. I don't know.
All right, Cody. Agree, buddy. But I'm
Appreciate
excited
you being
for 2024.
Here, man. Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
It sounds like
Arlington
it. And you should
bust,
be.
Mark. It's Arlington or bust. You know what? I was the only show that I know of that bet on us winning 10 games last year. I'm going to start the drinking early. I'm going to do it again right now.
Well, that's your decision. That's good. But if any, we can make any indication out of what happened last year. Absolutely. You were here pounding the table in the offseason, telling us how good Oklahoma State was and that nobody was giving them any chance in the Big 12. And then it started out rough. And I saw you take some shots on social media. And but it worked out.
It did. It worked out in the wash.
So good work by you. Good prediction there. And we will hopefully have you back here soon. We just wanted to run through the transfer portal and kind of get different takes from different people on their teams and see how this all played out.
Yeah, no, I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, we're in an odd position where we have far more returning guys than holes of necessity. So we filled it with a coach instead of a number of players. So I think it's shaping up to be a pretty wild ride for us in 2024.
Excellent. Cody Stovall, Locked On OK State, and it's at All Day O State on X.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Cody, appreciate
Absolutely.
you stopping by.
Howdy,
Good
Mark.
to see you, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it.
All right. We will keep it moving. So we've heard from 2 from the Big 12 with Oklahoma State and BYU. Keep in mind, we've got our all new Big 10 live show. It comes your way every Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We had our first edition this past Friday. For some of you who have difficulty tapping into the StreamYard link to access the show and to call us, we've got a phone line on Friday nights for the Big 10 live show. So we're looking forward to that. We have guests lined up, but we are also taking your calls. So the Big 10 live show every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's see. Any other business we need to take care of? We've run through the transfer portal. We've heard from BYU. We've heard from OK State, and we've got a Big 12 channel. So grab the link in the description section, follow it to the Big 12 channel. Check out our work right there. I see no super chats that I need to speak to or answer. So looks like we're in good shape. This is our transfer portal update for Thursday. We will see you back here. Let's see, for the Big 10 live show Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, enjoy the videos here at the Voice of College Football. We will certainly provide some additional ones coming up here in the next day or so. I'd like to get into AC schedule previews, although I sometimes hesitate knowing that if I deliver a Wake Forest schedule preview, nobody's going to watch it. So those tend to be a waste of time, but those are things I like to do. All right. Appreciate you being here. Big 10 live show Friday at 7 Eastern. See you then.